Speaking about the writers, you're talking about how they're in the locker room. They're on top of they may have an emotional connection to these guys more than broadcasters. You can't forget another thing is that a lot of them say we're just not voting the first time around. You ever hear that? You ever hear a writer say, depending on
I heard the writers say the strangest things, like they're doing a punishment. I know Marty Noble did it with Roberto Alomar because of what happened with the spitting incident in Toronto in the
right?
late '90s. So I'm not going to vote for him the first time around. There's something about that special essence of getting into the Hall of Fame the first time around, like the Cal Ripkens, the Reggie Jacksons, and the Tom Seavers did. So yeah, I've heard writers say they're going to punish players by not voting the first time around.
Yeah, but there are guys, and we just talked about this a little while ago. There are guys that are in the Hall of Fame right now that probably did take steroids. I mean that's a fact, and I would never go out there and say, I would never label somebody like, let's say, Frank Thomas, right? The Big Hurt. I would never, label him as a steroid user because he never got caught with it. But are you going to tell me that you're 100% sure Frank Thomas never touched it?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think so because Frank Thomas was pretty much the size he was when he first came up. He was a monster when he came up,
Yeah.
and he was a monster when he retired. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Frank Thomas did not use steroids. But I've heard rumors throughout the years about even Randy Johnson. I've heard a former player says, I think Randy might be on steroids. But again, no proof. But Johnson in his later years was dominant into his 40s, so you have to question that. But one guy we know we didn't take steroids, and you look at his numbers and compare them to Hall of Famer Kirby Puckett, Don Mattingly. Don Mattingly's numbers are identical to Puckett's. The only difference is Mattingly played during the Yankees between Reggie Jackson and Derek Jeter those years.
Right.
So Mattingly never played in the World Series, played in one postseason, his last in 1995.
Right.
And batted over 400 in that postseason, hit a big home run, but they wound up losing to the Mariners in 5 games in the division series. Now Mattingly is going to go to the Veterans Committee because his time's pretty much up now as far as trying to get him through the writers. But you look at Mattingly's numbers. First off, 9 Gold Gloves, 1985 MVP, runner-up 1986. Career 222 home runs, 1,099 RBIs, 307 average. That averages out to 20 home runs a year, 100 RBIs, and 307. Now listen to the years. 1984, 23, 110, batted 343. 1985, 35, 145, batted 324. 1986, 31, 113, batted 352. 87, 30, 115, 327. 88, dipped a little bit, 18, 88, 311, and then 89, his last good year, 23, 113, 303. That is a pure and utter dominance.
Yeah. And without steroids, because we know that steroids really weren't. Well, first of all, we know Don Mattingly didn't touch steroids. I mean, let's be honest here. And we know that, the steroid era really didn't set in until the end of Mattingly's career. But if Biggio's in, Mattingly has to be in. I mean, that's the way that it is. And especially with the player you just mentioned, Kirby Puckett, if he's in, Mattingly has to be in.
Yeah. And here's the thing about Puckett, too. Puckett, you saw the 30 home run seasons, 3 straight 30 home run seasons there for Mattingly. Puckett had one 30 home run season, and he played the Metrodome.
Yeah, exactly.
And he has 207 home runs compared to Mattingly 222, 1085 RBIs, Mattingly 1099. And Puckett batted, 10 points career higher.
And you cannot crucify Mattingly. In other words, use it as a reason to keep him out of the Hall because of his playoff stats, because he didn't have many. That's because of what you just said. He was on a team between Reggie Jackson and Derek Jeter. The Yankees, we all know, were not the most dominant team in the major leagues when Mattingly played for them. And another thing,
no, they didn't have pitching. They had a hell of a line because Winfield was on the team. So was Ricky Henderson.
Right.
But they just didn't have the pitchers that they had. They didn't have 4 number 1 pitchers like they had in 1999.
Right. And another thing is, you don't know if these writers hold it against Mattingly the fact that he played a shortened career and, he didn't have the trademark numbers to make the Hall in terms of well over 3,000 hits and your 500 home run mark. But look at those numbers you just rattled off. Consecutive years of 30 plus, or at least,
those
20
were 5
plus home
straight
runs.
dominant years where he was the best first baseman in baseball.
And clean.
And let me tell you
Clean.
this. No offense to Keith Hernandez. Don Mattingly was the best first baseman in baseball. Best
I agree.
by far. Slick like you wouldn't believe.
I agree.
None of these guys today can compare to what Mattingly was. And Mattingly was 1A, Hernandez was 1B.
That's that's a bold statement. A lot of people consider Keith Hernandez to be, defensively especially the best first baseman. But I agree with you, and I think that it's one of the biggest injustices to not have somebody like Don Mattingly in the Hall, and then somebody like Craig Biggio. Listen, I'm never gonna try and demean somebody like Craig Biggio, but honestly, Craig. I don't know. Mediocre comes to mind when I think about you. I'm sorry, but that's what happens. And, I'm happy you made it to the Hall. Congratulations. But if you're in, Don Mattingly should definitely be in.
All right, he's Anthony Carlo. I'm Mike Damergis. This is the New York Sports Machine.